Hello again. You are here to learn the second part of the lesson today because it's a Thunder Week. Woo! With that in mind, I'm going to be teaching you a second skill that writers often use, and I'm really going to be looking for this in your writing. Notice all the reallys. Make sure you're paying attention. I want to see this in your writing. We are going to be learning about how writers use anecdotes. An anecdote is a story that draws your readers in and makes them feel connected to the issue or problem. I'm going to say this one more time. An anecdote is a story that draws your reader in and makes them feel connected to the issue or problem. We all know that people love to hear stories and that people are connected by stories. When we insert true stories into our own writing, we are going to make our readers feel more connected and get them to buy into what we are talking about. Again, the piece of writing that I had you guys read today, The Life Among the Ruins, does this. It shares the story of the grandma at the beginning of the story and her family and what their life in Aleppo is like. Through this, we're able to have empathy for what's happening and how serious this situation is. I'm going to go through this story and show you where this is happening, and then I'm going to show you how I do this in my own writing. After that, you are going to be tasked with trying this out if you are ready. So, as we look at Life Among the Ruins, the beginning of the anecdote starts at the very beginning of the story when they're introducing the grandmother. So, the part where they introduce the grandmother says, a 60-year-old Amira Garman sat in a powder blue cardigan on a swinging bench beneath a gold-fringed yellow canopy. Right here we get a really clear detail of what she's doing and a little bit about who she is. The story then continues on. Later in the story, they talk about the Garman family again, but this time they are talking about the whole family and the father. So it says, Garman and her family fled to the countryside about 3 years ago. We were robbed by the armed group, her husband Saleh said, referring to the anti-government fighters, many of whom were once his neighbors. Saleh was imprisoned for a year after the opposition forces found a picture of the former President Assad's father in the family's home. In December 2016, the army reclaimed parts of the city. A year later, about 300,000 residents had returned, many of whom return must complete military service. In this paragraph, it's switching back and forth between present and what is happening with the Garman family. This again, as we see this anecdote or this story that the writer is sharing with us, it starts in the beginning of the writing. It's in the middle of the story. We go back to the Garmans and we're seeing how they're doing and what's happening. And then this continues to happen towards the end of the story. At the end, we hear about them again. It says, Garman hoped more families would return, but the wounds are still fresh. So again, when we try this skill out, when we lace a story throughout the story that we are sharing, we are creating a connection for our readers to understand the story better. And when readers have connection to our writing, they want to read it more, which is what we want them to do. So we should try this out. I'm going to give you an example of how I do this again in my story. This is in Google Doc. If you want to follow along while you are listening, I highlighted in a purple color what I did so that you can see it while I'm talking about it. So yeah, I'm going to show you, and then you guys are going to try this out in your own work today. And you're going to be awesome. So let's flip the computer around again. My anecdote is talking about the Chinook Middle School soccer team. So I start the beginning of my story with discussing, let's see if I can zoom in here. Yeah, there we go. I start with discussing the pizza party that the Chinook girls soccer team has. So it says, Chinook's girls soccer team gathered in the cafeteria in early February, ready to celebrate their winning season. Like past years, they celebrated with the cafeteria with certificates, pop, and pizza. But this year was different. This year, they were served whole wheat pizza. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, no. Look at how that's different. This is connecting our readers. It's drawing them in. They're like, how is this different? I need to know. Why does this matter? And then, bam, right underneath, I start to give them information about it. But I'm connecting this to a true story that people can relate to. As I was thinking about this idea of an anecdote, if you look, something that's not working in my story that the other story that I just showed you had is I didn't do a very good job of inserting the story throughout my story. I only talked about it at the top. So one way I thought that I could maybe fix this problem is one, if we look in my vivid details, which I talked about in the last video, if we look at the pizza example, I continue to talk about pizza and how people feel about it. So one example I give in here and how I'm connecting this anecdote throughout my story is I say, if a pizza is whole wheat but is dripping with grease from pepperoni and cheese, is it really helping provide students with nutritious food? One way I could do a better job of this is maybe talking about the soccer team again. Like, is it providing the soccer team with nutritious food to do this? Not really. I then also was thinking about my nacho example, which I know you guys all loved, but I think I'm going to take it out and change it to pizza and talking about the soccer team again, because if I do this, I'm inserting narrative all the way throughout my story, I'm inserting anecdotes all the way throughout my story instead of just kind of randomly at the top. And that more closely aligns with how writers draw readers in. So I changed the nacho part to say something like this. If pizza is whole wheat, but loaded with greasy cheese, processed pepperoni, and no veggies, is this really something that is adding to the Chinook soccer team's health? It seems it would be beneficial to consider the amount of cheese on the pizza, eliminate the pepperoni, and pile on the veggies. This connects all of the story together. This is what is tying the anecdote in from beginning, middle to end. It is also helping to connect my reader. Your guys' task today is going to be to try this out. I'm looking for you guys to think of a story. Like, you guys are all writing about something you care about. So what is your own personal experience with this thing that you care about? How can you draw your reader in with an example, with something that happened that you know about this? I know some of you were talking about the farmer's market. So how can you write an anecdote about your experiences at the farmer's market? I know some of you were writing about teen pregnancy. I know that if I was writing about that topic, I'd probably share an anecdote or a story or personal experience about my mom having a child at a very young age. In this case, I am talking about how an example of how the food system that we have at school isn't really working. Like, what is something that you already know that can draw your reader into this story that you have to share with them, this idea, this piece of journalism that is so important that they need to know about it? What story is going to help do that? What story do you want to share with them? This is your task today. You are going to try and brainstorm a story and try putting it into your narrative. Ready, set, go.